The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello and welcome to Perspectives. My name is David Schoeneman. I'm your host on this program, and I'm also the alderman for Ward 3 here in Nashua. On Perspectives, as you know, we take a look at a variety of issues on a state, local, and a national level that are of importance to you as Nashua residents, voters, and taxpayers. We do this to keep you informed so that when Election Day rolls around, you're prepared to cast your votes based on true information, not on just emotion or hearsay. Well, today is Thursday, November 10th, 2016, and 2 days ago we had our national election right here in the United States, and of course New Hampshire right here in Nashua, and the results are in and you've undoubtedly heard them. Today I want to take a look at kind of a retrospective. What does this mean? How did this happen? And where do we go from here? First off, we have Donald Trump elected as the 45th President of the United States. Many people today are protesting all over the country, protesting the result of this election as if it's wrong or unfair, or they're worried about it. Right here in the city of Nashua, the full board of aldermen today received an email, and the mayor as well received an email from One Greater Nashua, which is that organization that sponsored the Welcome Initiative, if you remember that a few weeks ago, saying that many people, many immigrants, some legal, some illegal, who are here in the area are very much afraid of what's going to happen under a Trump presidency. How did this come about? What does this election say? What are we facing in the future? This was not the first time that Donald Trump ran for president. Of course, he announced a candidacy in previous rounds. It never really went anywhere. But what happened this time? And I think that, as I've said in this program before and said elsewhere, an election isn't so much a referendum on a candidate, in my mind, as it is a referendum on the electorate. So while Donald Trump's campaigns in the previous seasons didn't go anywhere, this season, 2016, his same pitch, his same campaign took him all the way to the White House. What's changed? His message has not changed. I think what's changed is the electorate. And where is the electorate today, and why? Progressivism has been the hallmark, I would say, overall, of the Obama presidency. Progressivism has been tried out numerous times throughout history, once every few generations. I think President Obama brought progressivism to the United States for this generation. I think that progressivism was seen by the electorate once again as a failure that it always has been. It has never worked, it never will work. But it was tried again, and it will likely be tried again sometime in the future. So I think what brought about the change in the electorate was the experience that we've had with the last 8 years of President Obama. We see that progressivism doesn't work really unless it's forced upon us. It doesn't work unless we can continue to take more and more money from people that work hard to earn it, really stifling their opportunities and giving more and more to some of those who might think that they're owed something. Now, I have no issue with people who are in serious, dire need. Those people are always in our society, and we should always reach out and care for them. But progressivism that says that we should take from the 1%, stir up that hate towards the 1%, and transfer resources and benefits of hard labor to other people who maybe have not put in the time and the hard labor, it just doesn't work. And ultimately, everybody pays the price. I think what happened in this election is that people have been really grown tired of the progressive message. The progressive message is not just economics. It's also tends to be open borders. We've seen an influx of illegal immigrants. We've seen borders that have not been guarded. We've seen moves to bring in more refugees. And while, again, we want to reach out and help human neighbors, no matter where they're from in the world, there is a price to pay, and we need to be very careful on how we vet people coming into the country. So we've had progressivism that I think has caused the electorate to become very much fed up with status quo. I think Hillary Clinton made it clear that she would have continued Obama's practices and she would have taken us further down the progressive path. What's interesting, too, is that Bernie Sanders, although definitely a progressively minded candidate, also was somewhat anti-establishment. And I think another aspect of the electorate that they've grown tired with, or another aspect of government that the electorate has grown tired with, is the insiders in Washington who tend to run things for their own benefit. While the rest of us work hard and aren't enjoying a great economy, we see some lavish benefits and lifestyles being lived by people in Washington who are supposed to be our leaders and should be sharing in the burdens that they're putting on our shoulders. So here we had Bernie Sanders, an outsider, who did very well in the Democrat primaries. In fact, we only found out after the nomination was in that essentially the Clinton campaign, in conjunction with the Democratic National Committee, was really, as Trump pointed out, rigging, and as Bernie Sanders said too, rigging the outcome of those primaries. And I think that as time went on and more of these bits of information came to view in the public's mind, it became clear that there was corruption in Washington based on insiders doing what they wanted for themselves. And ultimately, I think the Democrat primaries showed that Bernie Sanders was strongly favored, and the Republican primaries, much to everybody's surprise, especially the other candidates, found that the message that Donald Trump has always been saying was this time gaining traction. On the show in the past, we've talked a little bit about the Brexit vote in England. And I mentioned in the past that I thought the Brexit vote could be an indicator for what might happen here in the United States in 2016. And I think what happened there is very similar. What happened there is that the English people felt they were losing England, and they wanted to somehow retain what is uniquely England. And they wanted to exit the European Union because they felt that the influx of Middle Easterners was too rapidly changing the country, and that the economic situation, the troubles on the European continent, was going to be dragging England down. And much to the surprise of many of the pollsters and the pundits who spoke in advance of the Brexit vote, the people did choose to leave. Similarly, here in the United States, the polls up until Election Day, up until this past Monday, were showing Hillary with a 2-point lead. And in the end, although she did get the popular vote, she did not get the Electoral College vote, and that's what really counts. So there were surprises all around, and I think just like people voted in favor of leaving the EU, British people voted in favor of leaving the EU because they wanted to get back to what worked for them and recognize that progressivism, European progressivism, wasn't going to work in England. I think people in the United States recognize that a European style of progressivism here in the United States wasn't going to work either, and we didn't want that. So how did Trump pull it off? Some are asking, how is this even possible? What happened is not so much that Trump changed his message, but that Obama set the stage by pushing progressivism, and the people pushed back because they got tired of it. I think that's a good outcome. I'd like to switch back for a moment to the comment I made just a little while ago about the email that we received from one Greater Nashua expressing concern on behalf of some of the citizens here in the area and some non-citizens in the area who feel that the Trump presidency represents hate and racism. Certainly, it does not. One of the questions that was asked in that email was, can we somehow provide reassurance to everyone in the country, or people who are concerned, that one man, in this case Trump, one man cannot override the Constitution? Certainly one man cannot override the Constitution. If one man could override the Constitution, it wouldn't be a Constitution. A Constitution should be immutable. It doesn't change as circumstances change, because if it did, you wouldn't be able to rely upon it. Some view the Constitution as a living document. It is not a living document. It doesn't change with the times, and that's good for those folks who are concerned. Now, how is the Constitution interpreted, and who gets to do that, and what does that mean going forward for President-elect Trump? Well, one of the big issues that we're going to be facing, or that President Trump is going to be facing, is going to be the Supreme Court. As you probably know, there are 9 justices normally on the Supreme Court. Currently, we only have 8 because Justice Scalia passed away a few months ago. President Obama has tried to get another justice nominated to the board for Senate approval, but Senate has rejected that idea in preference to what the new president, who now we know is President-elect Trump, would like to do in that matter. Because, of course, presidents nominate and Senate confirms. Right now, we have 4 liberal justices and 4 conservative justices on the Supreme Court. Justice Scalia was another one of the conservatives. So there was a 5-4 conservative majority. 4 liberals, and there were 5 conservatives. Now it's 4-4. And by liberal and conservative, I don't mean Democrat and Republican. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is the permanence or the view that justices take of the Constitution. Someone who is a conservative justice can also be called a constructionist, what I would call a strict constructionist. A strict constructionist says that the Constitution says what it says. It does not change. And that's the basis for the protection that it provides people today. A liberal justice will say, no, the Constitution isn't immutable. It can change, and it should change to fit the times. I certainly hope, and I think that candidate Trump, now President-elect Trump, promised to put justices on the Supreme Court who would be more respectful of the Constitution than and perhaps President Obama's pick would have been. I want to lay this out as encouragement and words of comfort for those who are worried that one man can change the Constitution. The Constitution should not be changed. So one of the biggest things that new President Trump is going to be facing is going to be the Supreme Court. We need one justice in there. Again, I would say a strict constructionist, someone who will uphold the Constitution and allow it to continue to provide the protections that it has for these 200 plus years. And of course, other justices are going to be getting older too. Justices don't normally retire. They normally die while they're essentially on the bench. And they're appointed for life. Some have retired in the past. Nothing wrong. That's their personal choice. They are appointed for life and they can stay in there as long as they'd like. It's up to them. But whether we have elderly justices retiring or unfortunately passing away in the coming 4 years, perhaps 8 years of a Donald Trump presidency, we're going to be able to rest assured that we have someone in the White House who at least has said that he will appoint constructionists to the Supreme Court. Very important aspect, and I want to help lay those fears to rest, fears that were raised in that email today from One Greater Nashua. Another issue we're going to be facing, or President Trump is going to be facing, at least as critical as the Supreme Court is domestically, is going to be national security. National security is probably one of the largest issues that we've been facing recently. We know of terror attacks around the world. I had a gentleman on, Joel Richardson, a few weeks ago, who shared his expertise on the Middle East with us and told us about some of the threats that a misunderstood Islam, and we're the ones who misunderstand it, I think pose in that region of the world and elsewhere as we consider national security issues, which include immigration. Just in the news today, before coming over to tape this show, I saw an article that said that Iran, of course we have that new treaty with Iran that's meant to limit their nuclear capabilities. Iran has exceeded the limit of what's called heavy water. Heavy water is used in the production of materials that can be used to make a bomb. And according to that treaty, they were given some strict limitations. Well, they've exceeded the limitations, yet they're saying to us that we must uphold our part of the bargain. And I think President Trump needs to navigate some very dangerous waters, if you will, on that contract, or on that treaty, and with regard to Iran and national security issues. A nuclear Iran would undoubtedly be very dangerous. The Obama administration, helped with John Kerry, of course, really gave Iran the green light to go ahead and develop nuclear capability. Maybe not today. They thought it was going to take up to 10 years, but I think Iran is accelerating that to some degree. It's going to be tricky. Of course, Iran seems to want to become the regional powerhouse in the Middle East. And what might that mean for our greatest ally in the area, Israel? Israel is not only our greatest ally in the area, but it's one of our best allies anywhere in the world. And while we've learned, I think, with time that a negotiated peace between Israel and the Palestinians is probably not going to be possible, and maybe we can't solve that problem, we probably cannot solve that problem, we do need to have a clear idea of whose side we're on. We are the world's powerhouse, and we can't just sit idly by saying we don't know about it, we don't care about it, and we can do nothing about it. We have to have at least some kind of position. And I'm sincerely hoping that President-elect Trump will establish a better relationship with Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel than we've had in the past. Of course, President Obama shunned Benjamin Netanyahu with White House visits, with communications, and nevertheless, Netanyahu came and spoke to Congress, and I think that was a great thing for him to do. But it spoke of the difficulties in the relationship between the United States and Israel. Again, Israel is one of our best allies anywhere in the world. And President Trump, I think, will need to navigate that one very, very carefully to assure Israel that we stand with them and to assure the rest of the world that we stand with Israel. And I think that's the way we're going to be able to maintain peace. If we show our weakness or if we abandon Israel to the wolves that surround it, that's not going to be a recipe for peace. Iran and others, I think, are just waiting for us to do that so they can step in and do what they've always said to do, and that is to wipe Israel off the face of the map. I don't think that will ever happen, and I would like to make sure that if it ever does, we're not on the side that contributed to it. So President Trump needs to step up on that one as well. We also have national debt. National debt, I think, is something that folks at home have grown to be very concerned with. $19.5 trillion debt. You've seen the articles that talks about how much that comes down to per household. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's a debt that it will be very, very hard to pay. Interestingly, the last time we had any kind of balanced budget, if I'm not mistaken, was when President Bill Clinton was in office and Newt Gingrich was Speaker of the House. And Bill Clinton wanted to spend more money, but Newt Gingrich held him to a balanced budget. And actually, we were able to grow the economy and balance the budget and reduce our debt during that time, thanks to Newt Gingrich, who may be a cabinet member in a Trump administration. We'll see. But the $19.5 trillion debt is a huge burden, and I think that we're going to have to do something to get our economy going, to stop some of the borrowing, pay our own way, and reduce this debt in some way. We speak about millions and billions and trillions. Just want to share a little piece of information here with you so you get an idea of the magnitude of the problem. If you were to spend $1 every second, how long would it take to spend $1 million? It would take about 11 days. It's 1 second after another, dollar bill after another, after another. 1 second, 24 hours a day, 11 days, $1 million. How about $1 billion? 33 years. Dollar bill, 1 second after another, 33 years. $1 trillion, 33,000 years. So here we have $19.5 trillion. Do the math on that. How long would it take to pay off a $19.5 trillion debt at the rate of $1 trillion every 33 years? 19.5 trillion is a huge, huge number. And it's not a number that's going to go away. Much of that debt is with China. And if China were to call in that debt, I think we could be in some serious trouble. And of course, that ties into national security issues because China has been acting up in the South Pacific, or in this South China Sea, I should say, claiming land that has traditionally been international or more recently belonged to other countries. national security as well, we have the immigration issue. And while our debt is tied to China, and it's a big number, I cannot say that our debt is tied to immigration, although immigrants do cost this country a great deal of money. And again, we're not begrudging the money that we're spending to help people in need, but we need to be careful to understand that this has an effect on our debt, has an effect on national security, has an effect on our own culture. With progressivism here in this country, President Obama has been advocating essentially open borders. This is proposed usually by George Soros, or typically by George Soros, who was behind the Welcoming America initiative that city of Nashua mistakenly recently signed. We should not have adopted an open border policy or an open border stance in conjunction with anything that George Soros might be saying, or that was tried by President Obama here, or by Europe, certainly England being subject to it as well. We have to be careful, and Trump has spoken about this repeatedly, about vetting people that come into this country to make sure that as we bring in refugees, we are not bringing in Islamic terrorists. Certainly some have come in on the refugee program. Others don't come in on the refugee program. Others come in on regular immigration programs. And we need to be very, very careful to understand who we're allowing into this country and not. Now, whether the United States is ultimately going to build a wall and force Mexico to pay for it, or whether we're going to suspend all immigration from Islamic countries until we can figure out how to better vet the people that are coming in, I don't know. These are things that Donald Trump said during the campaign, and I think these are things that resonated with the electorate. And again, I think that the electorate is looking for us to do some of these things. They're looking for Donald Trump to do some of these things, because this election was a referendum on the electorate, and this is what the electorate said they wanted to do. This is how the electorate has changed. So those are some of the issues that I think that a new President Trump is going to be facing. We have national security, we have the Supreme Court, we have debt, and of course we have health care coming up too. One of the things that he promised, that Donald Trump promised, was to repeal and replace Obamacare. Obamacare was a progressive health care plan that said that somehow health care should be free for all, or that someone else should pay for it. Nothing was done to reduce the cost of health care. The only thing that was done was to get someone else to pay for it, and it's a disaster. I have a new family now, as many of you know. I've got a little baby boy, Isaac. My wife Shannon and Isaac and I need to get some health insurance, and it's going to be about $1,400 a month. It's a lot of money under the Obamacare plan. I do not call that affordable. So we're going to have to find some way to fix the health care problem that this country is facing as a result of the Obamacare disaster. Finally, I want to just touch again on cabinet. I spoke about Newt Gingrich a few minutes ago. As President-elect Trump is working towards the transference of power from President Obama to himself in January, he's going to be choosing a new cabinet. Cabinet, of course, is close advisors. I think that Newt Gingrich would be great to help with foreign policy issues. I think he's quite astute on it. He knows what's going on. He's been around for a while. I think he'd be very, very good at that. Rudy Giuliani has also been discussed recently. I saw that in the news today as someone in the Justice Department. I think that's a great idea as well. He's clearly someone who's knowledgeable, and I think would be a good choice, if not in justice, then somewhere else. Ben Carson, too. Ben Carson, as you may recall, I've said in this program before, is the candidate that I voted for in the primary. I think he's a good man. I think clearly his expertise is in healthcare, and maybe there's something that Ben Carson can do to usher in a better program than Obamacare under a Trump administration. Folks, it's going to be an interesting time. I think that this has been a very interesting campaign season. Michael Moore was in the news today, too. He said, "I told you so." And indeed he did some months ago, I think before the primaries were even complete. He said that Trump was going to be the next president, and he was right. And I think that what he's saying now is that the Democrat Party did not pay enough attention to what the electorate was really saying. When the electorate was choosing Bernie Sanders, it's not because they really wanted Clinton. It's because they really wanted someone who was different. And Clinton was not different enough. She was the same old thing. So we need to consider what this new direction for the country, new direction for the electorate is going to mean for all of us. I think there are exciting times ahead. I think there are going to be some big changes and good changes. I think 4 years from now, the country's going to look a lot better than it does today. And certainly, we're going to reverse the trend, this downward trend of the last 8 years, and hopefully start moving upwards. As we're in our last minute here, I want to transfer back for a moment to Nashua issues. Coming up in the next few weeks, we have the charter school tax relief legislation. If you remember about this in the past, we had legislation before the Board of Aldermen that had initially majority support to provide some tax relief to the charter schools in the area. Charter schools, of course, are publicly funded schools whose cost structure is much, much lower than the regular public schools, and whose performance is vastly better than the regular public schools as well. So the charter schools in Nashua are providing a great service to our students, to our families, and to our taxpayers in getting excellent results at a much lower cost than the regular school system. Well, the board changed its vote, ultimately said no to granting the tax relief, but then tabled the measure. What came off the table at the Board of Aldermen meeting last night has been re-referred to the Budget Committee, where it'll be heard again. A couple of citizens spoke out in the meeting last night during public comment and expressed their concern. They pointed out the great benefit that charter schools provide and the fact, and said that we really need to do something to support them, which I agree with. I support that legislation. So tune in for that. We'll have the Micro Society on next week to talk about charter schools in Nashua, and we'll be looking forward to discussing the tax relief legislation during that show, and then, of course, at the budget meeting, and then ultimately at the full board. Folks, time is up. I want to thank you for tuning in. Thank you for coming out and voting 2 days ago. As you know, if you've read the paper, we had excellent turnout, very high numbers here in Nashua, throughout the state and, of course, across the country. This is a big election. And I think we have a good future in front of us. And I hope that the folks that came out to vote will stay involved, stay engaged, become informed, and voice their opinion, because it's the electorate that makes the difference in where this country goes. We are self-governed, and the electorate speaks and lays out our agenda. Thank you for tuning in. Appreciate that, and we'll see you next time.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.